That morning, Judge Caprio expected nothing unusual until the courtroom doors swung open as if someone were entering his personal office, not a chamber of justice. The sharp echo of expensive soles across the tile drew every eye toward the figure striding in with an air that didn't belong to a municipal hearing. On the bench lay a simple case, a $125 ticket for parking in a restricted zone, a routine matter. Something that usually took 3 minutes, 5 at most. But the young man who crossed the room shattered any sense of an ordinary day long before he reached the podium. He couldn't have been older than 28. His coat, cashmere, clearly costly, hung open as if buttons were beneath his dignity. One hand held a phone, the other slid casually into his pocket. He didn't acknowledge the people waiting in the back rows, nor the clerk, nor even the judge. His presence carried a cool, calculated indifference, as though everyone else existing in that room was a minor inconvenience. His first words weren't a greeting. They weren't even directed fully at the judge. He simply exhaled and said, with the tone of someone annoyed by a waiter's delay, "Let's hurry this up. I have a meeting in New York. This whole thing is ridiculous." A quiet ripple passed through the audience. A raised eyebrow here, a suppressed grin there. People who had seen arrogance before, but rarely served this early in the morning. Judge Caprio lifted his gaze. Not sternly, not irritated, just with his usual measured kindness, the gentle patience of a man who had seen every kind of personality walk through those doors. But the young man didn't return the courtesy. He tossed out, "You know who my father is, right? So let's not drag this out." The air in the room thinned. Conversations in the back ceased entirely. A woman in the second row, a middle-aged journalist from the local paper, straightened, recognizing him. She lifted her phone slowly, discreetly, already sensing a story brewing. The judge opened his mouth to speak, but before a word could leave, the young man's phone blared, loud, obnoxious. He didn't silence it, didn't apologize. He simply turned away and answered. "Yeah, I'm at some old courthouse," he muttered. "Don't worry, I'll make this guy wrap it up." He said it without lowering his voice. A few jaws dropped. The clerk froze halfway through a keystroke. Even the journalist's eyebrows lifted as she captured the moment. The judge remained unshaken, still, composed, but with a new, subtle weight in his expression. The case was no longer about a parking ticket. It had shifted quickly, unmistakably, into something else. Entitlement clashing with law, ego confronting dignity. And beneath that, something unspoken, yet gathering strength. The sense that this young man was carrying far more than arrogance into the room. The phone clicked off. The young man turned back, unaware he had just set the entire morning on a different course. He set the phone down with a sharp tap, the kind meant to signal impatience, rather than an accidental slip. For the first time, Judge Caprio addressed him by name, reading it from the citation. "Mr. Liam Brandmore." A faint smirk crossed the young man's face. He was used to that name opening doors, not being spoken in a municipal court. His posture stayed loose, but there was something in the way his fingers drummed against the podium. Controlled, almost calculated, like someone who had learned early how to mask discomfort behind attitude. Caprio scrolled through the system. A brief flicker of surprise crossed his features. So small the gallery barely noticed. Not Liam, though. His eyes followed every micro-expression on the judge's face, suddenly more alert. "You've had several prior violations," Caprio said calmly, "all dismissed by counsel." Liam shrugged. "That's what the legal team is for, isn't it?" It wasn't said rudely, just with the baffling sincerity of someone who'd never been asked to consider a world where consequences applied equally. His tone carried no malice, no intent to provoke. He simply didn't understand why this morning was any different. The judge leaned back slightly. "Have you ever been here in person before?" "No reason to be," Liam answered almost proudly. "Someone handles it." That someone had always been an attorney, an assistant, a driver, the invisible machinery of wealth smoothing every rough edge in his path. Today, for the first time, the machinery had failed to arrive on time, and without it the young man looked oddly out of place, like a person standing in unfamiliar terrain without a guide. To the audience, mostly older residents who'd navigated decades of life without shortcuts, it was a peculiar sight. A few faces softened for a moment, others hardened. Everyone projected something onto him. Caprio asked, "Why did you park in that zone?" "It was 8 minutes," Liam said, dismissive but not aggressive. "I was late for a meeting. Cameras caught it, sure, but I needed to run in and out. That area was open. It wasn't a big deal." His explanation revealed more than he meant it to. He wasn't trying to hide wrongdoing. He was genuinely perplexed by the idea that a rule was meant to apply even when he was in a rush. The judge's voice lowered. "Sometimes small choices tell us who we really are." A subtle tension tightened Liam's shoulders. He shifted his weight, as if those words tapped something he didn't want uncovered. Then, unexpectedly, unintentionally, he let a crack slip through. "You think I care about this ticket?" he muttered. "I've dealt with much worse. Or tried to." His voice had changed. Softer, brittle around the edges. Caprio watched him carefully. "What do you mean?" Liam exhaled, almost annoyed with himself for revealing anything. "Forget it. I'm just saying my father doesn't exactly make time for things that don't involve money." A murmur swept through the room. Not judgment, curiosity, maybe even a trace of pity. He looked away, jaw tightening. For a moment, the veneer of arrogance slipped, revealing something more complicated. A young man raised among wealth, but starved of presence. Someone taught that resources fix problems, yet never taught how to face the kind that can't be bought away. He placed his phone down, but his fingers trembled slightly as he did. So minutely he probably hoped no one noticed. The judge did. Caprio's response carried no reproach. "Son, sometimes the people we expect to guide us are the ones who leave us most lost." Liam flinched, not visibly, but inwardly, the way a person reacts when a stranger speaks a truth they were trying to outrun. The courtroom felt smaller suddenly, quieter, as though everyone sensed the story was turning into something deeper than a parking violation. And Liam, still pretending he controlled the room, didn't yet realize that the ground had begun to shift beneath him. Caprio turned the monitor slightly, studying the time-stamped images with a patience that made the room instinctively lean closer. Then he lifted one photo, tapping the lower corner with a fingertip. "Mr. Brandmore," he said evenly, "why is your vehicle positioned in an emergency-only lane?" Liam let out a short, careless laugh, as if the judge had pointed out a scuffed shoe. "That's not me driving. Someone else must have pulled in." Caprio didn't respond. He simply pressed a button, and a second image appeared on the screen. Clearer, closer, unmistakable. Liam stepping out of the driver's seat, takeaway coffee in hand. His smirk faded, replaced by a tight swallow he tried to disguise. A few people in the gallery exchanged looks, half disbelief, half anticipation. The journalist angled her phone higher, the red recording light glowing like a tiny beacon, ready to catch every misstep. The judge set the photo down. "Looks very much like you." For the first time, Liam's confidence flickered. "Fine," he muttered. "I didn't think it mattered." But the room sensed it. This wasn't just a lie. It was a practiced instinct, the kind that comes from years of having truth rearranged on your behalf. Then the door at the back creaked open, and a man hurried in, breathing hard, tie crooked, clutching a folder so tightly the edges bent. the assistant to the Brandmore family's legal counsel. His presence alone sent a low pulse through the room. He rushed to Liam's side and leaned in to whisper, but Caprio raised a hand gently. "Sir, are you here to represent Mr. Brandmore?" The assistant straightened, face pale. I'm here to observe." "Interesting," Caprio replied, "because on the footage, you're seen sitting in the vehicle minutes before Mr. Brandmore arrived." The assistant's expression collapsed. A few gasps echoed softly. Liam didn't look at the man beside him. He stared forward, jaw rigid, eyes dimming with the realization that whatever he thought he could control was slipping away. Caprio continued, not accusatory, simply factual. "This suggests there may be more to this situation than a parking violation." The assistant attempted a response, but his voice cracked, and he closed his mouth instead. He clutched the folder tighter, as though the papers inside might shield him. The judge's next question sliced through the silence, gentle but devastating. "Mr. Brandmore, does your father know this specific vehicle is being reviewed today?" The effect was instantaneous. Liam's composure fractured, not dramatically but visibly. His eyes darted up, then down. His shoulders stiffened. Something private and heavy surged to the surface, something he couldn't hide behind charm or arrogance. The audience felt it shift, the energy of the room bending around a truth still unspoken. The judge didn't press. He simply observed the young man with a steady compassion that made the moment even more uncomfortable for Liam, who was used to scrutiny but not to being seen. The assistant's hand trembled as he placed the folder on the podium. He whispered, barely audible, "We should stop here." But there was no stopping. The machinery that usually protected Liam wasn't functioning. The judge's calm questions, the photos, the assistant's panic, all of it peeled back layers Liam wasn't prepared to expose. He tucked his phone into his pocket, movements sharp and defensive. The mask he'd worn since entering the courtroom thinned, revealing someone not entitled, but cornered, uncertain, carrying a pressure far larger than a morning hearing. And as he struggled to steady himself, one thing became clear to everyone watching. This case had deeper roots, and the soil beneath it had just begun to crack. The judge let the tension settle for a long, measured breath. He looked at Liam the way a doctor studies a patient who insists he's fine while clutching his chest. "Mr. Brandmore," he said gently, "you walked in here acting like this was routine, but something in your eyes tells me otherwise." The assistant stiffened. Liam didn't lift his gaze. Caprio motioned to the clerk, who handed him a thin stack of documents. He scanned the top page, and his brow furrowed, not with anger, but with the quiet gravity of someone recognizing a detail that changes the entire conversation. "There's a discrepancy here," he murmured. "This vehicle isn't registered to you, or to your father." A wave of low murmurs rippled across the courtroom. Caprio tapped the VIN number with a knuckle. "It's listed under a subsidiary of Brandmore Logistics Group, a corporate asset, designated for official use only." He looked up. "Were you aware of that?" Liam's silence was louder than any admission. The assistant shifted uneasily, sweat forming at his temple. His voice wavered. "Your Honor, there may be procedural explanations." Caprio raised a hand. "Let's not complicate this with rehearsed answers." The clerk pulled up a second set of images from an auxiliary camera. These were clearer, taken from a higher angle. They showed the car parked crookedly in the emergency zone. In the back seat, 2 cardboard boxes sealed with security tape, each stamped with the red corporate insignia of Brandmore Logistics. The room leaned forward as if pulled by a thread. On the side of the boxes, in bold print, internal documents. confidential. The assistant's throat bobbed. His fingers twitched toward the folder he'd brought, but he didn't dare open it. Caprio's voice remained steady. Mr. Brandmore, these items, were they transported with company authorization? Liam shook his head, but not in denial. More like someone refusing to relive something painful. I didn't take them for money, he said quietly, surprising everyone, including the assistant, who stared as if hearing this for the first time. I wasn't stealing anything, I just needed him to notice. Caprio watched him, patient and unblinking. Liam continued, each word slower than the last, as though dragged out from a place he never meant to reveal. My father hasn't returned a call in nearly a week. I went to his office, and those boxes were just sitting there. He didn't even know I'd stopped by. He never knows. The assistant closed his eyes. The truth was out, and it was far messier than a corporate violation. The judge leaned forward, elbows on the bench. So you weren't hiding these from the law. You were hiding them from him. Liam's breath hitched. Not enough to be dramatic, just enough to betray a crack in his armor. That car, Caprio continued softly. Those boxes, they were your way of forcing your father to acknowledge your existence. The room fell utterly still. Even the journalist lowered her phone for a moment, struck not by scandal, but by the rawness of what she was witnessing. Liam didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of unspoken years hung behind him like a shadow stretching the length of the courtroom. Caprio sat back, the tiniest sigh escaping him. Not frustration, but sorrow. This isn't a case about a parking violation anymore, he said. It's a case about a young man drowning in the silence of a parent who never learned how to show up. The gallery remained frozen, suspended between sympathy and disbelief. And Liam, who'd walked in with the confidence of a man untouchable, now looked like someone standing on the edge of a truth he'd been avoiding his entire life. The courtroom felt as though the air itself had thickened. No one shifted, no one whispered. Even the fluorescent lights seemed quieter as Judge Caprio folded his hands and regarded Liam with a gaze both steady and painfully human. You came in here talking about deadlines, meetings, status, the judge said softly. But none of that means a thing if you haven't learned what it costs to be accountable. Liam stared at the edge of the podium, eyes unfocused, as though the wood grain could provide an escape. The arrogance he'd worn earlier had evaporated completely. In its place was a young man bracing himself against a truth he'd never meant to reveal. I wasn't trying to pull anything illegal, he said suddenly, voice rough around the edges. I took those files because he wouldn't answer me. I thought, if something made him worried enough, he'd show up, or at least call. His breath trembled, not loudly, but enough. Somewhere in the back row, a woman exhaled a soft, sympathetic, "Oh dear." No one laughed, no one scoffed. The vulnerability in his voice stripped the moment of any cynicism. Caprio let the silence settle, granting Liam the dignity of not rushing him. When a child, no matter how grown, has to resort to desperation just to be seen, the judge said, that's a wound deeper than any legal infraction. Liam blinked rapidly, fighting against a swell of emotion he refused to display publicly. He swallowed it down the way someone learns to do only after years of practice. The judge's tone shifted, still gentle, but laced with something firmer, older, almost paternal. You're not the first person to think success is measured by power or money, Caprio continued, but those things don't replace the sound of a father saying, I'm proud of you. They don't replace time spent. They don't replace love. The words struck him with the precision of truth rather than reprimand. His shoulders slumped slightly, not in defeat, but in recognition. Before the moment could settle, the clerk approached the bench cautiously, whispering something urgent. Caprio nodded and turned back to Liam. "There's a call coming through the clerk's line," he said. "Someone insisting on speaking with you." Liam's head jerked up, hope flaring too quickly to hide. "Who?" The judge hesitated a fraction of a second. "Your father." The room tensed as if it were a collective chest holding breath. Caprio allowed the call to be placed on speaker. Nothing clandestine, just a simple conversation broadcast into a room that had become uncomfortably invested. A crisp, cold voice filled the space. "Liam, whatever you're doing, stop making noise. We can't afford bad publicity today." Not a greeting, not concern, a directive. Liam's face drained of any remaining color. He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. "Dad, handle it, quietly. I'm in the middle of something important." The line clicked dead. No apology, no question. No acknowledgement of the pain his silence had carved into his son. The assistant shifted awkwardly. Someone in the gallery let out a tiny gasp. The journalist lowered her camera again, not out of respect, but because the moment felt too intimate to capture. Liam steadied himself with a slow, shaky breath. When he opened his eyes, the bravado was gone entirely, leaving behind someone heartbreakingly unguarded. Caprio spoke gently, but his words cut through the lingering cold of the call. "He may not hear you," the judge said, "but I do." The sentence landed with the weight of something Liam hadn't felt in years: recognition. A soundless moment passed, just the faint hum of the lights, the soft rustle of someone shifting in a coat, the almost imperceptible catch in Liam's throat as he tried to gather himself. And for the first time since he'd walked into that room, he looked less like the heir to a billion-dollar empire and more like a son who'd been waiting his entire life for someone, anyone, to say those words. The judge rested his hands on the bench, not with authority, but with a quiet resolve that felt heavier than any gavel strike. The tension from the phone call still clung to the room like a cold draft. Liam stood motionless, shoulders low, eyes distant, as though he were realizing piece by piece how long he'd been carrying a weight no one ever acknowledged. Caprio cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Branmore," he began, "the law requires a penalty, but justice demands understanding." He paused, letting that distinction land. "I'm upholding the fine," he continued, "but I'm adding a condition: 10 hours of community service at the youth center on Cranston Street." His tone never sharpened. It stayed calm, firm, almost compassionate. "You'll work with kids who don't have parents at home. Kids who know what it means to feel invisible." Liam's head lifted slightly. His eyes flicked to the judge, disbelief flickering through them. Not at the penalty, but at the unexpected humanity woven into it. "I'm not punishing you," Caprio added. "I'm giving you a chance to see what you've been longing for in your own life." For a moment, Liam didn't speak. Then, quietly, without the slightest hint of defiance, he said, "Yes, Your Honor." A breath later, softer, "I want to do it." The gallery reacted with a subtle shift. Not applause, not triumph, but a collective recognition that something inside the young man had begun to change. When the hearing adjourned, the journalist who'd recorded everything approached him near the aisle. She wasn't intrusive. Her expression carried something gentler now. "I know your family," she said. "If you ever need someone to talk to, feel free to reach out." Her voice wasn't predatory or sensational. It was simply human. Liam hesitated, almost tempted, but then he slid his phone into his coat pocket and shook his head. "Not today," he whispered. "Not avoidance. Choice." The first real boundary he'd drawn for himself. He turned toward the exit. Before he could step through the double doors, Judge Caprio called out, his voice steady but warm. "Mr. Brandmore." Liam paused. "When you're ready to talk honestly," the judge said, "you're welcome to come back, not as your father's son, as yourself." Liam didn't move at first. The words rooted him to the floor, as though they unlocked something he wasn't sure he was brave enough to face. Finally, he looked over his shoulder, a small gesture but a meaningful one, and nodded once. Not polite, not forced, genuine. He walked out, the doors closing behind him with a soft thud that echoed longer than it should have. The courtroom remained still for a moment before the clerk leaned toward the judge. "Do you think he'll change?" she whispered. Caprio watched the closed doors, his eyes carrying decades of seeing people rise and fall, stumble and recover. "If even one person heard him today," he said quietly, "he might." The room fell back into its usual rhythm, the shuffle of papers, the hum of fluorescent lights, the low murmur of the next case being prepared, but the atmosphere lingered with something almost fragile, hope, not certainty, not resolution, something quieter, more honest, a beginning.